Hey folks, I'm Alana, and when I was at PAX East just a couple of weeks ago, I spoke to quite a number of developers, AAA and indie, about the whole death of single-player games thing, why it might be happening, and where it might be coming from.
Isn't that cute? So, we're talking about IGN, and the last time I did a video related to them...
Sonic was never good. If you disagree, you can call the cops.
But let's give some context. The video in question is about how single-player games may be hurting due to Twitch and YouTube, mostly due to Let's Players. I mean, this completely ignores the fact that despite that single-player games are still being made in this year alone, and we had plenty of great ones last year, things like God of War, Far Cry 5, Persona 5, Breath of the Wild, Cuphead, Mario Odyssey, I think you get the point. And we've got quite a few coming in the future, too. So I'm gonna state off right off the bat, no. Single-player games are not dying out. Of course, there are those who disagree with me.
As it turns out, devs say Twitch is a really, really big factor. One person I spoke to is Rami Ismail from Vlambeer, who said that one of the most under-discussed effects of Twitch and YouTube is that no major studio outside of first parties who are trying to sell consoles, or a studio with a reputation for making single-player games, really has a reason to bother with immersive single-player campaigns.
Notice the lack of companies such as Capcom, Atlas, Platinum Games, or any actual Japanese-based companies there, all of which have games that are not only popular but also have single-player modes to them. This is a dumb narrative, and it's something that we've been seeing for quite a while. I mean, this was something that was going on, and EA was pretty much saying that single-player-based games were dying out. However,
you have failed me for the last time.
I don't think they're a credible source to take in consideration for this.
Content creators will generally only play a single-player campaign once, meaning the hype dies out really, really quickly. And grabbing the attention of content creators is one of the easiest ways to market games right now.
This is actually true, but also wrong. You see, some games like this actually inspire people to check them out. However, this is a broad generalization that this person is doing. See, the thing is, when you watch a player play a game...
If developers want to take advantage of those content creators, the best way to do it is to just make a game that has never-ending content. Make a Sea of Thieves, make a No Man's Sky, make a Destiny, and even if it's bare bones on launch, keep updating it and people will keep on advertising it for you. Frankly, even if the devs don't update it, a lot of people will keep playing if the core game is solid. PUBG has never-ending content because each match is totally different, without PUBG core needing to do a whole lot.
The problem is that making those kinds of games and having them becoming popular is really a shot in the dark. Fortnite was an extremely lucky game that managed to get past PUBG. You'd have to be able to get something past the Titans in multiplayer game. I mean, why would you play some no-name multiplayer game when you could play one of the bigger names like Overwatch? Because the more popular a game is, the more players you can play against. I mean, that's just common sense. And if a new game that doesn't get a lot of exposure or doesn't get a big push right off the gate, then that's going to be really hard for it to get traction and actually get past those Titans.
We're also just seeing more and more people look to Twitch and YouTube to get their first glimpses of games, potentially ruining the stories and making them not feel the need to buy them as a result.
You say this while showing the newest God of War game.
Brilliant! Brilliant!
You know, and here's the aspect that you're missing here. The actual gameplay. Not everyone plays games for the stories. One of my favorite games of all time, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, does have a story to it, but I don't play it for that.
Now you're just being nasty.
I keep coming back to it because I want to slice and dice giant robots over the top villains while rocking out to awesome tunes. Or how about Persona 5? You're gonna bring it up later, but while it has a story-driven game, you also have gameplay which is really good and fun to build up their characters. And this is a problem that you're ignoring, the gameplay. Just because someone can watch a person play a game, that doesn't mean that they will have the same experience. For example, I watch a lot of Oxhorn recently, and I like his content. He's very interesting, and in fact, he actually got me into playing Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4, mainly because of his lore videos. I wanted to explore these places myself, and I actually wanted to get myself power armor, so I invested in getting these games. Now, while I will admit this is anecdotal, it does show that there are people who will get interested in these sorts of things. And I will explain more as to why some games don't get exposure, like they do for other games.
Persona 5 had crazy strict stream restrictions to prevent this exact thing.
Bring on the mariachi band! That's not mariachi!
How convenient that you're neglecting to mention that Atlas actually rescinded those restrictions greatly, and even then, the game sold really well. We're talking about a game whose series was really niche, but managed to sell well over 2 million copies, the best the series has ever done so far. Also, the game won an award for Best RPG of 2017, and was a nominee for 2017 for Game of the Year, Best Art Direction, Best Soundtrack. If you bring this up to back up your points that single-player games are dying because of this, then it's a pretty mood example.
And a studio who made a 2016 game called That Dragon Cancer wrote a blog post about how they really believe that Let's Play culture really hurt their revenue. There's no doubt that Twitch streams and Let's Plays, which are free to watch, prevent some people from wanting to buy narrative-driven games, which in turn prevents some devs from wanting to make them.
How they believe. No real facts behind it.
You don't know yet!
That Dragon Cancer is a very niche game, which only has its story to support it. Yes, it does have a couple of mini-games, but they're nothing really to write home about. While I do admit that it's really possible that this game was hurt by YouTube Let's Players and Twitch streamers, that's due to the fact the game has only one aspect to it that people can latch onto. Its story. If you only have a game that's based on a story, and you watch someone play it, and there's nothing else you can do in the game other than just see the story again, then there's no reason to actually play the game again. I would also like to point out that despite this, there are some story-based games that are much more linear that did well at the time. Stuff like Firewatch, which despite what happened with PewDiePie, was a very well-received game and did receive a lot of support at the time. Then you have things like the Ace Attorney series. Games that take hours to complete. Not only that, but have a lot of charm and humor to them that allow people to replay them when they want to. If you make a game with just a single story, with nothing else to it other than just maybe a couple mini-games or puzzles, then there's no real reason for play your game. It's the same issue with replayability. This reminds me of the whole walking simulator games. I mean, what's the point of playing them if you're just gonna have them like that? If your game only has a story to it, there's no real reason for people to actually pick up your game once they see it. And the thing is, there are ways to get around this. And some of them are really easy to do, like add gameplay features like more puzzles, throw in some randomized events, or have multiple endings to the game. At the very least, that'll give people more of a reason to see what secrets your game holds. And this really isn't an issue for single-player games that are more gameplay-focused, games like Cuphead, and I'll tell you why. You see, gameplay is not always concrete. Everyone's experience with how gameplay works in games will not be the same because of how people play the games. Some may be more callous, some may be more tactical, some may just want to jam in and just ram into people.
Gamers are also statistically deciding to play more of the same game for longer, according to industry analyst Michael Pachter. People are playing more of Fortnite, more of Sea of Thieves. That means they're buying less games overall, and that tells devs that they need to make games as service-styled games where it's easy to put in microtransactions and continue to profit. That basically saves them from the fear that gamers are buying less games, meaning the challenge isn't now, how do we sell these games? It's, how do we sell this one game and keep people playing it forever and get them to be so loyal that they'll keep spending money.
Hand it over. You made a reference to a source, and I'd like to see it. If you're willing to use this to back up your point, it would be good to actually source this.
With all of that said, I do imagine God of War will sell incredibly well. Horizon Zero Dawn sold really well. And that's kind of how this cycle works. As more devs are moving away from single-player-only experiences, Ubisoft being a really great example with games like For Honor, Siege, and Wildlands.
I mean, I wouldn't consider Ubisoft to be a good example of this. They've been making multiplayer games ever since the early 90s. And to this day, they still make plenty of single-player games. The Assassin's Creed series, South Park Stick of Truth. Hell, Far Cry 5 still has a good single-player campaign to it from what I've read. Just because a company is working on games that have multiplayer, that doesn't mean that they're going against single-player games at all. The fact of the matter is that For Honor and Wildlands still have single-player campaigns in them, and that kind of feels like you're misrepresenting the games because they still do possess them. My point is that they make both single and multiplayer games. They're not moving away from either of them, at least that's how I see it.
The appeal of the few single-player games that do pop up is higher. Sony's clearly using that logic to sell hardware, and it's working for them. It's third parties like Bethesda that I'd keep an eye on over the next 5 years. With Dishonored 2 and Wolfenstein 2 not selling remarkably well, that games-as-service, Twitch-friendly model gets more and more appealing, and I think that really sucks.
I mean, it's not like there are other factors to this game that, oh wait! Dishonored 2 was known to have a lot of bugs on PC, and had a lackluster story in people's opinions, and Wolfenstein 2 was a terrible sequel. I mean, you're just cherry-picking some of the worst examples to highlight your point. And I can easily do the same thing because I brought up a lot more examples earlier in my opening statement. There have been a lot of great single-player games that have been from varying degrees that are on the market that do well. And we got games like Crash Bandicoot that came back and was actually very popular. And the upcoming Spiral Reignited games are being met with a lot of hype. And that's basically the video. I know this is a short one, guys, but really, if you're going to say that single-player games are going to disappear, an aspect of gaming that's been around since its inception and has been going on for years, back it up! I'm Trash Comment, and remember to examine your fandom.